Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. My name is Tom Luongo. It is Thursday, May 18th, 2017. So, never a dull moment. Ever. So today we're going to talk about the Russiagate / the potential impeachment of the president. We're going to talk about what's going on in the gold and silver markets. We're going to talk about a couple other things as well. So let's get right to it. All right. The big news of the day and what's moving markets and everything else is this idea that Donald Trump should be impeached because he shared secrets with the Russians during Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's meeting with Trump and Tillerson at the White House the other day, or last week, which is, of course, complete nonsense. I think if you didn't see Putin's reaction to this, Russian President Vladimir Putin's reaction to this, it was it was really rich, actually, and you can find it on YouTube. I think Russia Insiders got the scoop on this. But Putin was having a press conference with the Italian foreign minister, the Italian prime minister, Gentiloni, and he said, if Minister Lavrov had not shared any of this information with us or with me or the intelligence services, I have to severely reprimand him. You've been a bad boy, Sergei. And there's Lavrov in the audience laughing uproariously. It was just it beggars description how far the Democrats and the anti-Trump wing of the Republican Party are willing to take this because of their desire to not see the gravy train, the corruption train, end. And this is really what this is about. And you had to understand that it was always going to be something like this. And winning the election was only the beginning of draining the swamp. And I certainly hope that Trump has a plan with which to body slam Jim Comey over this and Schumer and everybody else. Because if he doesn't, his presidency is pretty much over, at least for the next year. I mean, he's not going to get anything done. Putin's follow-up point is probably the most salient, aside from his snark, which was quite funny, which was to say that, at first his reaction to this was disbelief and kind of shock and are you serious? And as it has crescendoed, he said, no, this actually scares me because you people have lost your minds and you're now your corruption is so endemic, it's so deep that you're willing to destroy your country and destabilize the entire world for your personal nest eggs. And that's what this is about. And Putin is absolutely right to make that point. And it shows his statesmanship and it shows his responsibility as a world leader. Something at this point that nobody in Congress on either side of the aisle is showing. And we as Americans should be, aside from the fact that we shouldn't be shocked by this, we need to be outraged. And if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. It's just that simple. So I don't think Trump's going to get impeached over this. I don't see that as the end game. I see this as them permanently trying to weaken him, especially as he goes overseas to try and shore up relationships with the three most important religious leaders in the world. Or at least the heads of the three major religions in the world, Saudi Arabians, the Israelis, and he's going to visit the Vatican as well. And it's an important point because all of these places have huge geostrategic and geopolitical implications over the course of the next couple of years as Trump attempts to de-escalate and pacify relations with Russia and wipe out ISIS and, in effect, undo the last 15 years or even more of U.S. foreign policy, because that's the task that's ahead of him, and it's very obvious to me at this point that he sees that as the goal. The question is going to be whether or not he's getting the right advice to get to the right conclusion in the end. I'm a little worried about this idea of creating a NATO out of the Gulf cooperation states, including Egypt, as a counter to Iran. I'm as well not surprised, but still very concerned about our overt support for the Kurds in such a way that we're going to put American bases much, much closer to Iran than they've ever been before. That's the goal, right now in Syria. It's not overthrowing Assad. That's off the table. Putin took care of that. Now the question is, what is the end game for U.S. involvement in eastern Syria? And it is to build bases all through what is going to become Greater Kurdistan. Expect, I think, at the end of this, that Turkey's going to get carved up. Erdogan's already been put in this place by both Trump and Putin. And all of this is to continue to put pressure on Iran for the sake of Israel and the Saudis, which is very much a bag of mixed emotions and very much a mixed bag geopolitically. So we'll see how this plays out. But that's the state of play right now, geopolitically. And it all feeds into this idea that Trump should be weakened as weak politically at home as possible in order for him to structure this in a way that the U.S. deep state is happy with. And I'm not sanguine about the results. Let's just put it that way. All right. So in conjunction with that, over the weekend, I haven't had a chance to really talk about this very much because I've been just terribly busy this week with the launching of my premium investor service over Seeking Alpha, Stock, Shocks, and Rocks, which is now live, and you're more than welcome to go over and take a look at and subscribe if you so like. I would appreciate it. I've been busy with that to the almost to the point of distraction, and I haven't had a chance to talk about the One Belt, One Road summit that happened over the weekend in Beijing. If you look at the list of participants, if North Korea wanted to wipe out the leaders of the world, all they had to do was launch a nuke at Beijing, because pretty much 3/4 of the world leaders were there. The world's leaders were there at the summit this weekend. And both Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping made it abundantly clear that this project is not about a new version of globalism or a new version of colonialization. This is absolutely about bringing Asia out of the Dark Ages in whatever form and function the people locally want that to take. And they're willing to do everything they can to, including investing scads of money, to build the infrastructure out, to create a global trade network that will ultimately result in a period of peace and free trade. That's the goal. And I believe them when I hear them say it. I'm not cynical about that, because I understand that that is the only way in their minds to counter the inherently aggressive nature of the post-World War II Western institutions, the IMF, the WTO, the Federal Reserve, the EU, the U.S. government, the UK banks, all of it. That's been the model for the last 400 years, starting with the formation of the Bank of England going back into the 1700s. I mean, this has been the state of play. This has been the wave of history. That huge wave of history is ending. It is ending, and this project has the ability to change the world. So we're going to watch the development of this very carefully. It's going to have a lot of moving parts. There's going to be a lot of it's going to be incredibly exciting to watch, to see how the geopolitical map is, how the chessboard changes, right, with every move that's made. But at the end of the day, I can tell you that Putin and Jinping are in lockstep on this. They have built the infrastructure financially to ignore much of what is going on in the West. And that's the important part. Okay. And that's what you have to understand. Between Russia having its own SWIFT system, really China having the same thing, effectively the ability to move money electronically, have its own secure electronic payment transfer system that currently is handled by SWIFT, which is dominated by the U.S. To have their own internal systems, have their own credit card systems, to have their own clearinghouses, to have ruble and yuan swap lines set up, to have yuan clearing in London and Frankfurt and Singapore, outside of Hong Kong. It's all very, very important. These are the things that create the liquidity pools that allow for capital to move across borders and for projects to get done. Without these things, it doesn't get done. This is the technical nuts and bolts, nitty gritty of what needs to be done. The Asia Infrastructure and Investment Bank, is a direct challenge at the Asian Development Bank, which is dominated by the U.S. and Japan. All of this stuff. So understand that that's what's happening, and they have very, very big plans to change the way the world works. And they're not trying to dominate it. Well, I mean, they're going to dominate it, especially if we continue to fight any advancement of this. As opposed to being partners in this, we're being adversaries. And I think that ultimately Trump sees this as a positive development. He's obviously going to take an America first position on this, and I would expect him to do nothing less. I don't expect him to, subordinate himself to Putin and Xi Jinping over this. I just don't see that actively trying to sabotage the project is a way to gain dominance. That's the wrong way of looking at it. India stormed out and called it all silly and colonialism, and that's just Modi and his people doing the U.S.'s bidding. And India and China don't get along anyway. So just understand that that's what's going on here, and the Indians have fully committed themselves now to a path of doing what the West wants them to do, and to be the vanguard or the fifth column within the BRICS. And the Russians and the Chinese are hip to this. This is why the I in BRICS is no longer India, it's Iran. And it is. And India's such an unbalanced economy and so dependent upon Chinese trade and Russian energy technology that India is not going to be able to chart its own independent foreign policy, regardless of how much money they think they're making. It's an incredibly unbalanced, corrupt economy that has a lot of growing up to do, and their energy infrastructure is absolutely and utterly their weakest link. It's third world. It's absolutely third world. So, all right. And it's going to be the Russians that bring it into the first world with their nuclear technology. It's just that simple, and that's where the money is, and that's where Putin's energy diplomacy works very, very well. Is to remind people, at the end of the day, we have energy and you need it, and energy is getting more expensive, and we can provide it for you at a reasonable price as long as you're not jackasses about it. All right. In light of all of this, we had a massive correction in the Dow yesterday. 372 points it was down. It is what it is. The Dow has needed to correct for a while. I'll show you the chart and tell you what I think. What I think is the takeaway from this. I don't see it as a big deal at this point. It's throwing a weekly bearish reversal, but within the monthly chart, it looks just fine. We'll need to see another 600 to 700 point drop in the Dow before the end of this week for me to get a little. To think that there's going to be a much bigger correction than this. This to me just looks like more wiggle within a consolidation pattern. Okay, violent, but it's a violent correction, but it's not trend changing yet. Okay, and then the last thing is for those of you who have been following me on Newsmax for years, that we've had Ford in the portfolio, and that Ford's been under pressure. I don't like the position Ford's in, both technically. I think the stock is very, very weak at this point, even though the management is doing everything right. They're going to lay off 10% of their workforce, and that workforce is going to be their older, more expensive workforce is what they're getting rid of. They're going to be doing forced retirements and buyouts and all of that of people who are now less. They're going to be able to change the composition of the workforce in such a way that they can lower overhead, and that's the important part as we come into a correction within the automobile market. I think Ford's management is right on top of everything. I don't have a problem with the company from that perspective. I don't have a problem with the company from an operations perspective, from a management perspective. But the market absolutely hates Ford right now. Most likely going to go to $9. If it goes to $9 and there's no cut in the dividend, Ford is an absolute and utter buy, and I will issue that buy signal through my service at Seeking Alpha. All right. But at this point, the bearish weekly close last week below $11 is significant, and we have to respect it. And we haven't seen any bounce on this news. Usually, Wall Street loves it when companies say they're going to lay off people and they're going to restructure and that kind of thing. That's usually enough to get a relief rally. We didn't see that. That means that Ford's going much lower. All right, so let's talk about gold, silver, and the Dow, and then show you the charts, and we'll get you out of here. Now with all of this, there's been a big move in gold this week. And I intimated that was very likely could happen because there was a relief rally that needed to happen in silver, and then we got some sympathy, and then we got yesterday's big move down in the Dow, and a huge move into safe haven assets as U.S. Treasury debt was bid down, nearly 10 basis points over the course of the last 24 hours. Gold popped from the 1230s to 1260 and everything else. We saw a high yesterday, I think around 1265 or whatever. Doesn't matter. It's still a major. This is still a corrective move here in gold, and this breakdown here, this is bad. Now we've got a low here, so this is good. It's a higher low than we had previously. This is a weekly chart, but we still need a close this week above 1272, and I don't see that happening with today's price action. Certainly, it's not being confirmed by silver, and certainly it's not really even being confirmed by a continued move in U.S. Treasuries either. At least as far as we haven't got. I'm going to live with this. I'm recording this before the U.S. Open, so we'll see what happens. But I think that we're done. This move this week is done. We didn't get a break above 1272. If it's going to need to do that before tomorrow afternoon, or this isn't a 2-bar reversal, and if it's not a 2-bar reversal, any further rally is going to be weak, and we'll top out at around $1,300 at best, if not fall off before then. And I'm not even convinced it's going to reach 1272. All right. So that's where we are in gold. So any move higher here that doesn't breach 1272 before the end of the week is a very good opportunity to put a hedge on. If you're long gold equities, you can then put on a hedge against. That's where I would put the hedge on in something like Dust or some kind of leverage short ETF is where I would put my short on here. I wouldn't put it. You don't sell bottoms and buy tops. You buy bottoms and sell tops, right? So. All right, and the same thing here in silver, and I think it's even more pronounced here in silver, that you've got this spike bottom, you get this big correction, short covering rally, and then we had a move up to $17, and this morning silver's trading at around $16.65 or something like that, $16.60, which is just a huge warning signal that silver can't maintain this level, and anytime we get any kind of price appreciation at all, the sellers come in and they're done with it. And it's also confirmed by the fact that oil wasn't able to move technically higher either in any substantive way. Copper doesn't look very good either from a weekly perspective. They all look bearish, and so the exaggerated move down in silver is because of weakening global economic fundamentals, and it trades like a commodity, and commodities don't rally when there's going to be a global recession. It's just the way it is. So, silver needs a move above 1729 this week for this to be a significantly strong move to negate, this massive thing, which could have been this. I read an article on Zero Hedge that this big move down in silver could have been a massive liquidation by Noble Group, the energy trader that needed to raise capital, and so they liquidated a massive silver position, and that's probably part of it. But at the same time, the rest of it doesn't look great either. So there it is. All right. So the last thing to look at is this move in the Dow. So I told you earlier that I thought this is a weekly bearish reversal. Now, if we get a close below, and again, this is a weak signal because this is a 3-bar reversal. And if you notice, there's a gap here on the chart, on the weekly chart, that we gapped open 4 weeks ago. Now, when there's ever a gap, and there is a gap in a chart like the Dow, that gap is gonna get filled. It's gonna get filled. It always does. It doesn't matter. Important stocks always, indices, whatever, always gap fill. Okay, the market always wants to test that price area to see if it can uncover buyers or sellers, and how many buyers and how many sellers. It always fills the gap. It does. It's something you have to. Now, things like GLD, which only trades for 6.5 hours of the day, while gold trades for 23.5 hours a day, or 23 hours a day, is a different story. There's going to be gaps all over the daily chart of GLD because of the fact that gold can move when GLD is not trading. So that's a different scenario. But I don't care if you're looking at Microsoft, you're looking at the Dow, or you're looking at some minor, some small cap. Okay, not penny stocks, but small cap. You will always see gaps fill on charts. Always. It's one of the few things in this life that I consider pretty much it's almost a law. It happens at least 95% of the time. And so what we have here is a gap fill on the Dow to the downside, and not much else other than that. Let's see what happens today and tomorrow. If the Dow can regain the bottom of this bar, which I don't have marked and I didn't check, I don't remember the price of, but I think it's around 2750 or something like that. That's what it looks like. If that's the case, if it gets back above that bar, then all we're doing is creating, we're just extending this consolidation range between this high here and this low here, and that's all this is. It's just a wiggle, and that fair value on the Dow is right around here. The middle of this range, fair value is around 20,750, and that's it. If we got to move down below this level, or even down closer to 20,000, well, then we could be looking at a significant drop to somewhere down to the 18 range. That will be in place for a while, but it's not there right now. Right now, the Dow looks fine. So does the S&P, and so does the Nasdaq. Okay, so that's pretty much what I've got for this for today. We will check in probably again on Sunday, maybe Monday. I'll try and get one done to cover the weekly closes on Sunday, but if not, it'll be Monday morning, and we'll go from there. So look for a move above a close this week above 1729 in silver. If you don't get it, it's a good opportunity to short, i.e. to hedge, like with PSLV or something like that, to hedge against any long silver miners you are. Same thing with gold. The move in gold is 1272.40, 1273 to be and to be safe. And let's watch to see if the Dow breaks down another 200 points, because if it doesn't, this thing doesn't mean anything, and it was just market clearing. It's just the market needing to rid itself of some weak longs. All right. So y'all take care. You have a great weekend, and keep your stick on the ice.